I want to encourage you today to stay awake. I was going to say for the sermon, but now I'm going to say, I was originally going to say for hope. So I think that's what we're talking about today. Stay awake for hope. So our first candle of Advent is about hope. The two readings that we heard, the one from Isaiah and the one from St. Mark's Gospel, about hope and staying awake for it. So 2 days ago, on December 1st, our neighbors, who we're very close friends with, received their 12th grandchild. Now, her name is Norma Elizabeth Flynn. Okay, now, a little bit of background on how Nora got here. So, she has a sister who is 7 years old, and so whenever her sister Colby was 5 years old, her parents, Kathy and Colin, decided that it was now time to make sure that Colby had a sister or a brother. So they decided with full heart to go about becoming with child, to become pregnant. And they did, and so that was about 2.5 years ago, and so they were all excited for the first month, the second month, the third month, and then in the fourth month, Kathy miscarried. So that was just put a big damper of dishope upon them. But again, it sprung up. A little bit more energy. Let's try again. And they did. About 6 months later, they tried again. What Kathy found out in about her third month is that they had a high-risk pregnancy. So what they had to do was she had to go to the doctors weekly. She had to give herself shots, all kinds of things that some of you might be familiar with. And so things were going well, high risk, lots of protections until 2 weeks before the birth. So what happened 2 weeks before the birth was Kathy woke up one morning and she said something's not right. So she consulted her doctor, and the doctor said, well, I'm just looking over your test and tell me what you're experiencing. And she described it, and he says, everything seems to be okay. But the next day she still thought, no, something's not right. And so she insisted on going to see the doctor again, and he ran a sonogram, and what they found was there was no heartbeat in the baby. And so for the next 2 weeks, she had to carry that baby to term, and she did, because a cesarean wasn't possible for her. And after that, how sad that would have been. How she described it was, she said, I was massively overwhelmed with despair. And then there was a little thing kept working in her, try one more time. And they did. And what she had to do was she had to not tell many of her friends about that because they were all discouraging her. She couldn't even tell her father or some of her really close relatives or siblings. She had to silently go through that with a couple more people. Just 2 or 3 knew about it until the glorious event that happened on December 1st. And Nora Elizabeth Flynn is with us. So she held on to hope. What she kept was she kept her flame alive. Now, I don't know everyone's story here in the church, but I know a lot of your stories, and I know that many of you have experienced from time to time those vast darknesses of life. Be it a family member who just can't get it together, be it a husband who has one diagnosis after another and has surgery after another, be it someone who gets a horrible diagnosis himself or herself. Some of you have had relationships break apart. Others of you, financial crisis. Many of us have gone through those moments of overwhelming darkness. And whenever you think, how do you keep that glimmer of hope alive? Well, if you can relate to that, the people in our two readings today, the one from Isaiah and the one from Mark, that's exactly what they were experiencing. This chapter 65 of Isaiah is written not by the Isaiah we know as the prophet. This is probably Deutero-Isaiah, someone who came way far after him. But here's the situation. Judah, the chosen of Yahweh, Judah, who, the Son of God is going to come through, they are now totally defeated. And they're in what we call the diaspora. They're conquered by Babylon, and they're totally wiped out. And so they're scattered among all the nations. They don't even know who's alive and who's not alive. And then the Babylonians get defeated by the Persian king. I can't remember his name, or the Syrian king, one of them. And then all of a sudden the remnant starts. The 2 or 3 or 4 people that are still from the line of Judah, they are the remnant who now are going back to their old places. Now, you've seen the pictures in Syria with those bombings, you've seen, how awful those ruins are, and they're not happy, like they're freed, now, but they're going back into their land, and it's not like the land they knew, and, they can't find their friends, and they are pretty despairing, and that's where the prophet comes up to prophesy, saying, God, can't you tear open the heavens and come down and make it work for us? Can't you do that? As you did it in ages gone by where the mountains even shook. Can't you do that? We need you to do that. And they're feeling quite a lot of despair until they think it out further and they find a spark of hope that said, but we remember when you did. And then they say, so you are our Father, and we are the clay, and you are the potter. See, can you find that spark of hope and stay awake for it? That's what Advent is about. Now, if you're not going through a personal overwhelming massiveness of despair at this point, and I hope you're not, for a lot of us just living today in our land is pretty despairing for some people. Not knowing who to believe and what to trust. Many times there's situations going on like, what is going to happen with North Korea? And are we equipped? What's happening to our immigrants? Is this all right? How about those tax cuts and all the things that are going on? I'm sure at different times we feel massively overwhelmed and don't know what to do next. So you have to keep a spark of hope alive. That's what it's about. So what could that be? Well, let me point out a couple things that you might want to reflect on. There's an energy here these days that seems to be life-giving. I hear a lot of noise, which sounds good. Mostly every week, we get to see a new face here and there. We don't have all of our pledges in yet, but we have quite a few of them. And the ones that we have are pretty much on track for us to have a pretty good year. We have ministry to people who don't speak English. We thought we'd start out with 2 or 3 or 4 people. We now have 3 classes. Things keep on growing. We have 4 people here as a part of the sermon who are going to be commissioned as ministers of the community of hope, which is a fairly new development within the church, which is lay ministry to people who need presents. Not the ones like we do at Christmas and package up, but real live presents. So there's lots of things to be hopeful for. I was at a play this past Friday down at the O'Reilly, and I was texting before it started, and I don't know what I did with my phone after that. But we got to the restaurant after the play was over, and so I discovered I didn't have my phone with me, so I went and checked in the car to see if it was there, and I discovered in the car that it wasn't there either. When I got back to the restaurant, Ken was just finishing up a phone call where he says, "Thank you, Sean. Yes, we're at the Eaton Park on Banksville Road." And I said, "What's that?" He said, "Well, it's the floor manager found your phone, and he is going to return it to you." Driving all the way up to this restaurant to do that. See, there's sparks of hope, isn't there? Yeah. One of our members had a cough this morning whenever she came into church, and Tammy's little granddaughter, little Zoe, reached into her pocket and had a cough drop and gave it to this person. See, there's sparks of hope. See, that's what we live on, those kind of things. I don't know if you remember way back when we had a little thing on the TVs called P in P. Do you remember that? P, capital P, small I, capital P. It was picture in picture. Do you remember that? So what you would have is you'd have the big picture on the screen, but then in the corner you'd have like a little picture, so you can kind of like watch two channels at the same time. You know, I think we still have that. But in 2004, in the Ukraine, and I'm not that much of a history buff, but I think this is interesting and a good way to end this sermon. Viktor Yanukovych, or someone might know the name, Yanusko, I can't remember. Viktor, anyone remember the guy's name? He was running for president. Okay, whatever his name is, I can't remember his last name. Yushchenko, thank you. Yes, that's it. Viktor Yushchenko. So he was running for president. The people loved him. But the state government did not like him. In fact, what they did was they threw acid on him, disfigured his face, also poisoned him, and he just about died. So they were trying to get rid of him. And so what was happening is that the election occurred, and Yushchenko actually won the election. But the state-run television got on and said, Yushchenko tremendously defeated. Our next president is the other person. Now, as that was going on the big screen, in the right-hand corner was a lady by the name of Natalia Dimitruk. She was a person who signed the news. And so she was over there listening to what was being said, and she was signing, and she knew what was being said was not true. So she was signing, it's not true what they're saying. Actually, Yushchenko is the president. He won by a whole lot. And so she did that in that little corner of the screen, and all the deaf people then started texting their friends, letting them know that Yushchenko is really the president, and then it just started to spread from there. Then some of the reporters got the courage to also speak the truth, and then it just went on and on and on to thousands of people becoming what was called the Orange Revolution. And then they staged a protest in Kiev demanding re-elections, and all of a sudden Yushchenko became the president. You see, it doesn't matter what's on the big picture screen many times. What matters is what's being signed that is the truth. So, Advent 1, the first Sunday, invites you to find that little screen in the bottom that's signing the truth about you. And stay awake for hope.